Welcome back to the Daily Dope Show. My name is Brandon, your host and your friendly commentator. So today, unless you had your head buried in the sand and you live under a rock down the road from the cave, like by the troll bridge, like me, you probably didn't know, but Sessions was it was his turn to go to this crazy Russian hacking bullshit thing going on and testify about what he knew or when he talked to somebody about this Russian shit. So I think, when you got somebody under oath and you want, and you have some questions that you want to ask them, even if you did have a question to ask about the Russian shit, maybe, that's a good time to ask them that. So on Twitter, I'm guessing people from the left were criticizing the Republican that was grilling him, Steve Shabbat, specifically about the cannabis questions. And you know what? Just shut up already about the Russian hacking bullshit. Like we can get into a whole nother show, or this is for a different channel. I'm not into this uh, mainstream political discord right now, discourse, whatever you want to call it. I'm not trying to get into those conversations, but when you sit there and attack somebody for asking questions about marijuana of Jeff Sessions when he's under oath, you're an asshole. That's all there is to it. So, like, what the fuck is your problem? There's people suffering right now because of this marijuana being Schedule One. There's a lot of people suffering. There's people that need it as medicine, and there's, like someone brought to my attention, there's people that don't even know about the good benefits of it, could be benefiting from it, might even die because they didn't know about it. And then you're going to tell people to have some decorum when talking to Jeff Sessions on the fucking marijuana issues because you're more concerned about some Russian bullshit that's probably not even true about Russia influencing the elections. And, I'm not going to fucking get into that shit, like I said, but don't be an idiot. We need to ask Jeff Sessions whatever we can whenever he's out there answering questions under oath is a fucking perfect time. All right. So let's see how that went for Sessions. In the midst of congressional grilling, Sessions takes heat on marijuana attitude. So this was more or less a critique of his rhetoric more than anything else, which is pretty cool, and getting him on the record to just kind of like own up to some of the shit he said, which he doesn't do. And I guess that's the only headline on this story to walk away from is he really doesn't fucking have any convictions about any of the fucking bullshit rhetoric that he's been saying since he came into this attorney general position. And beyond that, because remember when he was just a senator last year, when Obama was still president, he was throwing all kinds of salt that way about Obama's, Cole memo type hands off approach, and basically saying that Obama endorsed a dangerous substance becoming legalized, which is total horseshit. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and read this. This is by Polly Washburn from The Cannabist. The U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions testified before the House Judiciary Committee on Tuesday. He fielded a pressing question on the Trump campaign's contacts with Russians, and his past remarks on marijuana. Steve Shabbat, a Republican from Ohio, which is in the process of implementing its medical marijuana program, noted that while it remains illegal under federal law, many states have legalized cannabis for medicinal or recreational purposes. Given that disparity, Shabbat asked Sessions to clarify what is your department's policy on that relative to enforcing the law. And on that, to that ends, we've seen the DEA's national, on the ground, state by state numbers and efforts since legalization in 2014, or sales started, I should say, of legalized cannabis in Colorado and Washington. What we've seen really is just business as usual. We haven't even seen the level of DEA involvement on the ground that we've seen at the end of the Bush era or the beginning of the Obama era, when they were still lighting up dispensaries all the time in LA and other places. So I really, so far it's been basically business as usual. There hasn't been any kind of ramp up of this fucking weed war that everybody everybody keeps being like super shitting their pants about. I mean, sure, rhetoric has been coming hard as hell, and Sessions wants to bring back DARE and stuff. I mean, he wants to go right back to the 80s with the drug war. And since they're finding out that they can't do it with marijuana, they're switching that over to the opioid epidemic, thinking maybe we can use a hammer to nail this problem down. So let's see what he says. Sessions did not add any nuance to the status quo, responding, quote, our policy is the same really fundamentally as the Holder-Lynch policy, which is that the federal law remains in effect and a state can legalize marijuana for its law enforcement purposes, but it still remains illegal with regard to federal purposes. So he's kind of alluding to the idea that even though the local guys might be letting you do what you're doing, at any time we can come in and shut it down. And I mean, they have been known to do that with grow operations of large size, should I say. And when the bust originally happens, and I don't know, I don't really give the media or the press or whatever you want to call it, I don't give them a whole lot of credit, because they basically like tell you like, oh, this bust happened in Pueblo, and like all these people got arrested and got charged with conspiracy and crazy ass like trafficking charges and shit and manufacturing charges, and they had like X amount of plants and they had this many, and then and it just kind of looks like maybe they were raiding somebody that was working under the auspices of legality, but in the DEA's mind they weren't. But the press is just going to be like, okay, what do you guys want us to say, DEA? And they don't really like try to be unbiased or whatever. I don't know, I'm just saying, like, we don't really know if like they're for federal purposes, like I said, like if anybody that had been running a really legitimate legal in their state marijuana operation had problems with the DEA yet. I'm sure we would have heard about it, especially since Sessions ramping up the rhetoric kind of like put everybody's focus on all the busts that were happening, just to make sure that there wasn't no sign that this was actually coming to fruition. So back to the thing. Moments later, Stephen Cohen, a Democrat from Tennessee, where medical marijuana is still under discussion, followed up on Sessions' response. Referring to the Raurenbacher-Farr Amendment, Cohen outlined how former Attorney Generals Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch abided by federal enforcement limits imposed by congressional budget appropriation in states that had passed medical marijuana laws. He asked, quote, will you abide by congressional appropriations and limitations on marijuana when it would conflict with state laws? Quote, I believe we are bound by that, Sessions replied, who has asked Congress to not renew the amendment. I think the amendment's back up for renewal in basically a month, so we'll see what happens there. Cohen also pushed back on a quote from Sessions earlier this year regarding the relationship between marijuana and heroin. In March, Sessions said in a speech to law enforcement, quote, I've heard people say we could solve our heroin problem with marijuana. How stupid is that? Give me a break. In the prepared notes for that speech, Sessions had written, I am astonished to hear people suggest that we can solve our heroin crisis by legalizing marijuana so people can trade one life-wrecking dependency for another that's only slightly less awful. On Tuesday, Cohen pressed Sessions on this claim. Quote, marijuana is not as dangerous as heroin. Do you agree with that? Quote, I think that's correct, replied Sessions. Well, thank you, sir, responded Cohen, who went on to advise Sessions that when it comes to law enforcement, the Attorney General should, quote, look at the limitations you've got. Put your enforcement on crack, cocaine, on meth, on opioids, and on heroin. Marijuana is the least bothersome of all. So he just set the bar really low there. Marijuana is not as dangerous as heroin. Do you agree with that? Now, we all know that Sessions has the authority, so to speak, to push or to overall just take marijuana out of schedule or, God forbid, move it to a schedule 2 or 3. Sessions can do that anytime he wants. Don't forget that. And so could have Eric Holder. So when Eric Holder is out there criticizing Sessions for what a fucking hardliner or whatever, don't forget that Holder could have done that at any time. He could have been like, you know what, this is on the lowest end of the priority list, and quite frankly, it's just a big waste of time. And I mean, when you look at the DEA's budget, they pad the numbers on ditchweed. They get ditchweed money, and then they give states ditchweed money for eradication as well. I mean, how does that turn out? Cohen quoted a recent study and advised, quote, in states where they've got medical marijuana, they have a 25% less opioid use. It gives people a way to relieve pain without using opioids. So I would hope you'd take a look at that. Sessions responded, we will take a look at that. We will be looking at some rigorous analysis of the marijuana usage and how it plays out. I'm not as optimistic as you, he says. Wow, so that says a lot there. First of all, I kind of believe him when he says this. We will take a look at it. You know why? Because we'll be looking at some rigorous analysis of marijuana usage and how it plays out. What he's alluding to there is they got people in place right now that are gonna like do the same thing as the Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Report does, and that's they take a bunch of statistics and extrapolate the data that they need out of them. Oh, all these people that caused fatal accidents tested positive for marijuana in their system. So I guess they were stoned when they were driving, even though marijuana stays in your system for 30 days or more. So, that's just a small little nugget of the overall like cake. That's like a crumb off the cake of how they can take data and extrapolate and make it sound bad. And then he can say, I'm not as optimistic as you. Yeah, because he already knows how they're going to they're going to rig the fucking deal and make it so their look at it is basically a look at how they can make it sound like it's not medicine or it's not, doing anything to help people off of opioids or it isn't good for pain. I don't know how you're going to find that because everybody that takes it for pain says it's better for pain than opioids. And of course, there's hardly any of the negative outcomes of long-term use. So, fucking good luck with that one, Sessions. Cohen wrapped his line of cannabis questioning with a reference to another Sessions quote that has been an ongoing source of concern to marijuana legalization advocates. Quote, you said that, let me start that over. You said one time that good people don't smoke marijuana, he said. Which of these people would you say are not good people? Cohen listed Republicans John Kasich, George Pataki, Chris. This list is funny. It's hard to believe when it starts, but it just keeps getting harder and harder to believe. Kasich, okay, maybe. George Pataki, I got my doubts there. Probably maybe for medical, or he tried it in high school. And I'm sure Rick Santorum and Ted Cruz, being the theologists that they are, have some kind of a story about when they were, before they churned to the light, that they were, under that the devil's lettuce or some crazy bullshit. So maybe give them credit. Jeb Bush, whatever. George Bush, which one? And even so, both of them maybe, and I doubt it. I believe cocaine more than weed on them guys. But anyway, Arnold Schwarzenegger, we know, smoked weed, but that was probably like, a side note to his drug use. And then Supreme Court Clarence Thomas. Not sure. He probably has a similar story like Santorum and Bush. I don't know. I have to look into that. But there is some new suggestions for my never-ending series of good people that smoke weed. Thanks for the list there, Cohen. But then Cohen was like, he implied that all those people at some point said they used marijuana. We'll have to check into that. Tom Angel would know. Which of these people are not good people, he asked. Sessions responded, let me tell you how that came about. See, this is what I was talking about at the beginning. He's not apologizing for any of these statements. He's not trying to say, whoa, whoops, I was stupid. He's just trying to say that you're taking him out of context, that he didn't really mean it that much. Like, it's the weirdest walk back. I didn't expect Sessions to do it. It's kind of like a dog with the tail tucked between the legs walk back kind of thing. But anyway, here's what he says about that. The question was, what do you do about drug use, the epidemic we're seeing in the country, and how you reverse it? Part of that is a cultural thing. That's what I always say about the gun thing. Like, I don't think gun control is quite the way we get out of this mass shooting bullshit. But probably what we could do, though, is turn the gun culture into something a little different. Right now the gun culture is, it's a, I don't know, like a I could do a whole like series about it. Like the gun culture could be changed. We could still have gun rights, Second Amendment rights, and everybody could own as many guns as they wanted as long as the gun culture wasn't as weird as it is. Anyway, but yeah, that's the way it is. He's saying with drug culture. I explained how when I became a United States attorney in 1981 and drugs were being used widely over a period of years, it became unfashionable, unpopular, and it was seen as such that good people didn't use marijuana. That is the most backward statement ever because if it was a fact that drugs by then had been being used widely, and then what? You got it to the point where people were like, "Oh, if you're a good person, you wouldn't use marijuana." That doesn't. I've never seen that era anyway. By the way, and that's just because you were projecting that. That was like the "Just Say No" campaign or whatever. That's what you were trying to portray with decades of reefer madness. You were like, every step of the way, marijuana smokers kill people, marijuana smokers rape people. Marijuana smokers are the minorities that kill and rape people, of course. Marijuana, and then you had to tone it down. So marijuana led to heroin, or marijuana makes you lazy, makes you stupid, makes you this, makes you schizophrenic, that. So you always do that. That's always been the rhetoric. But what I've seen is what you've seen too, is that we're melting that shit away. We're getting rid of those old stereotypes, and you don't like that. You want to fight against that. So you want to get it back to a time when people thought the good people didn't use marijuana. I don't get what you're saying because there was never a time like that. No matter how much you push that rhetoric out there, the worst people got in their minds as a marijuana problem is some like Shaggy in the back of the fucking mystery van smoking too much weed and eating too many Scooby snacks. And that's not even really that bad. No one's got these other bad people or in mind, and people don't look at someone as a marijuana smoker and be like, "Oh, he can't be a good person. He smokes marijuana." I've never seen that stereotype actually applied where people actually thought that that was a thing. So I don't know. So that was your context. My context is you're always full of shit, no matter what, Jeff Sessions. Here's him actually saying.
Colorado was one of the leading states that started the movement to suggest that marijuana is not dangerous.
Celebrate today's victory.
And we're going to find it, in my opinion, ripple throughout the entire American citizenry, and we're going to see more marijuana use, and it's not going to be good. We're going to see more other drug use, illegal drug use also, which is damaging. I mean, we need grown-ups in charge in Washington to say marijuana is not the kind of thing that ought to be legalized. It ought not to be minimized, that it's in fact a very real danger. You can see the accidents, traffic deaths related to marijuana jumped 20%.
Wow.
These are the kind of things that we're going to see throughout the country. And
that's the kind of rhetoric and
heroin,
fake
more
statistics
than it would have, I think, had
we're going to see.
About it. The creating of knowledge that this drug is dangerous. You cannot play with it. It's not funny. It's not something to laugh about.
The problem is, Sessions, is that's all people have ever done about marijuana, including the mainstream media, including the local press, everybody that ever fucking wrote about marijuana, except for Polly Washburn, others at the Cannabist, Tom Angel, Russ, Radical Russ. The thing is we are doing this shit because we're sick of that. We're sick of people joking around about marijuana and acting like it's a fucking big joke and something to make weed puns and out of headlines and shit. It's not what it's about. So thanks for being on our side on that one. But what you're trying to say is that it's some kind of serious thing that could hurt you or something like that. You know, we know that's not true. And you just look like a fucking clown spewing that shit.
And trying to send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Yeah, you should have gave that context there instead of just pushing that shit off. So that's it, guys. Another victory over Jeff Sessions, and I'm kind of glad that this Sessions thing happened and is still happening, I guess, because the thing about, and his political capital, by the way, is so low that that's probably half the reason why he's receding into the corner on this one. But if Trump didn't get elected and Sessions wasn't put into power, we would have never had these real heated discussions in Washington, D.C. Quite frankly, we might not have had the cannabis caucus. We might not have had any of this shit. Any talk on, like potential presidential nominees putting marijuana legalization fucking bills on the floor of the Senate and the House. I mean, this shit would not have happened without Sessions, guys. So give him a pat on the back at least for waking people the fuck up on this fight. And I know there's a lot of people that will say, oh, people would have been doing this fight anyway because of all the people that legalized. What? If Hillary was president, they wouldn't have done shit. Marijuana might be moved to Schedule 2, which would have fucked everybody's medical marijuana programs up anyway. Other than that, nobody'd be talking about this shit. So, and we wouldn't have people like Cory Booker putting a bill to legalize marijuana and penalize you if you don't. So that's all I got. Thanks. Subscribe if you like this video, and don't forget to hit the like button if you like the video too.